Greetings, class. This is John giving you a little bit of a screencast-o-matic mixed with some Jing screenshots to do a little bit of a discussion for the stakeholder component of our discussion board. So I'm going to use the investigating the links to improve student learning executive summary as pretty much the foundation for the conversation today. So I'm going to follow along with a couple of excerpts from that and expand upon that a little bit. And this is the Wallstrom, Lewis, Leithwood, and Anderson article. So what I want to first point out is what the article starts out talking about is that there are 4 direct influences that impact student learning versus the indirect. The direct ones being the student and family background, the school conditions, the teachers, imagine that, and then the classroom conditions, all having direct impacts on student learning, whereas all these other individuals have indirect impacts onto the student learning process. So I thought that was an interesting point to put out there, and I thought that was interesting to say the direct versus indirect components of that. What the article started shifting into a little bit was, as the research concluded or went forward, they talked about 3 different kinds of leadership within the school system: the collective leadership, the shared leadership, and the distributed leadership. And what I looked at is the collective leadership, and you see on my right side over here, it said the how do we do it? And I couldn't help by thinking this the famous statement of all together now, or I think on a little bit more of popular culture with Finding Nemo, where I can't remember the name of the character, Dory, the character starts talking about keep on swimming, keep on swimming. We're getting the unified effort of all folks in one direction, which is what we're using as a definition of leadership, getting people to see a common idea and moving forward with it. So being able to move together and tip the boat, as it were. So kind of a neat little aspect there. The shared leadership is along the lines of can we work together in smaller groups of people or in schools to do those things. And then the distributed leadership was the final one, and that's more along the lines of what are the actual things that are being done to get the things taken care of. And the article does a great job covering a lot of that. So let me talk a little bit about that because we're in a leadership program as we move forward. When we look at instructional leadership from the article, it talks about setting directions, and I think that goes to the visionary planning and the ability for a leader to know what needs to be done in moving the group forward, and that could be through transformational leadership, that can be through contingency by putting the right leader into the situation that requires them, or the situational adapting your needs or adapting your style to meet the needs of the folks that you're leading. And developing people. You are all in 609 going to be learning about a gentleman named Michael Fullen. We talked briefly about his books last week in class. But one of the key concepts he's going to talk about is hiring for capacity and capacity building. And that capacity is the strength of the individuals in terms of their leadership, teaching, etc. abilities in the school system. And there is the singular self-capacity, and then there's the collective capacity. And the singular is the individual themselves having the ability to do a much better job or increasing their ability to do better and better jobs. And then the collective capacity is the ability for the group as a whole to do that. And that really gets driven from individuals getting better, groups getting better, learning from one another in professional learning communities, or PLCs as they will be called. And then the leader also moves on to redesigning the organization and then managing the instructional program. And we've talked about managing not really being leadership, but there are many aspects of leadership that have to have some aspects of management, because you can't all just lead and say this is fantastic. There are managerial aspects of all the work that we do, and I'm sure several of you are nodding your head saying yes, that is correct. There's a couple of patterns that were outlined in the article as well about leadership. The first one was that the principals in schools actively collaborated with influential teacher leaders and outside experts, and that is to say that they really partnered well and utilized those individuals who are very good at being leaders and experts in their areas to not just delegate out and say, hey, you do this, but let's work together in a collective fashion to make those things happen. The second pattern, that was the strongest one, in my opinion. The second one, pattern 2, was the principals in those schools were working on lots of different things, but really independently. So they weren't really working with folks, they weren't eschewing it so much, but they weren't gravitating towards it as much as you saw in pattern 1. And then pattern 3 is the principals in the schools maintained administrative oversight and didn't do a whole lot in terms of collaborative learning moving forward. So obviously you go from the yay to the it's not so bad to the we want to avoid this one. Moving forward on to stakeholders, I thought I'd throw a little humor out there on a Sunday evening. We're going to talk about stakeholders being one of the schools had noticed that they had a multi-stakeholder school leadership committee. And I think it's critical for us to recognize as leaders that yes, we are leaders and there are followers, and there are times when we ourselves are followers. And I admit I enjoy those days when I can just follow orders sometimes, but also the days that I really like to be a leader a whole lot more. But we have to recognize that one of those key stakeholders we've got to be concerned with are our students. We are going to be leaders of them, but not necessarily going to, we have to think of them more as stakeholders more so than followers per se. When I talked about the effective side of leadership, efficacy, and support, and again, we talked briefly about Dura. You'll learn a little bit more about him next in the 609 class. But again, you see encouragement by districts of relations with parents and communities and getting those parents in there and the communities as a part of that. And I've listed a few stakeholders that I feel are important. You've got the students, you've got parents, you've got community and employers, teachers, principals, and other school administrators. There are the district leaders, superintendents. The Board of Education is a stakeholder because they have a vested interest in the success of how the students do. And then state and national legislators are also stakeholders in this capacity. One of the last things I'll hit on real quickly is across these cases that they saw as far as the district leadership, I want to refer this back to Delpit, as we're reading in our 605 class, in that there are, we can set the bar high, and we will achieve that bar if we set it high. But if we set it low, then it's easy for us to achieve that low bar. But when we're teaching to a test, we're just going to teach to that specific test and not really push our students above and beyond that. So that's going to be critical for us as leaders as well. And I do want to offer, sorry, Dr. Gary Dickers, an EDL 609 spoiler alert, and that is that you're going to learn a lot more about stakeholders in 609, and I think you will all enjoy that experience. So I appreciate the time you took to listen to this and watch this, and I hope you all have a great day.